The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Coming up on Farm Connections, Dan takes us on a visit to some of the oldest farms in our region and meets the families that keep them alive. Then he brings us to Farm Safety Camp, where students get valuable lessons on rural living. And we'll meet our FFA Student Leader of the Week. It's all next on Farm Connections. Farm Connections on KSMQ, sponsored in part by the Cedars of Austin, a senior living community. We even have a retired farmers club. Independent, assisted, and memory care apartments. Learn more at cedarsofaustin.com. Will Mahler, the ag attorney, has been representing dairy farms in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin for 37 years. Will Mahler, the ag attorney's office, is in Rochester, and Will is a proud partner of Farm Connections. Thanks, Will Mahler.
How many businesses do you know of that have been in the family for 150 years? That's a long time, but it's a reality for anyone who's been part of a Sesquicentennial farm. 150 years ago, the first pioneers began to settle in this part of the country, and they built the oldest settlements in Minnesota. These families worked hard to make the land productive, and their descendants are still at it today, using different equipment and farming techniques, but keeping an important family tradition alive. Join me now as we visit a few Sesquicentennial farms in southern Minnesota.
Well, the people that were here back in the 1850s, they were wonderful pioneers that really got us on a good start. And it's very impressive to see what has happened around here over the 150 years.
I guess it's got the roots. I mean, it's something that go back and say, you know, grandparents have been here, also my great-grandparents, but it's my great-great-grandfather that homesteaded here. I guess you have to look at it long term. If you look at short term, you know, I want to make as much money as I can right now. You know, it might hurt the land and everything, but if you look long term, you know, we have to save the soil, and maybe the profits won't be quite as much, but we can live with that. Come on, cows. Once you get a good piece of ground, you know, it's nice to hold on to it and keep it in the family if you can. Actually, when he came from New York State, my great-great-grandfather homesteaded near Rochester, and you're supposed to get a house built within a year, and he didn't do that, and so somebody jumped his claim. So then he came out here and homesteaded, and then he got his house built right away. Well, there was marriages and births and deaths and illnesses, all inside the house, and it was very true. My aunt got married there, my dad passed away in that house, and so it's seen a lot of different, you know, things over the years. The grandpa and grandma lived there. The school teacher had a room because the schoolhouse was only about 1/8 of a mile away, and then they had hired men and everything. So at the time, they went from a log cabin to a great big house. So it was quite a big change. The trees that we're standing in, it was really old trees and everything, and Dad took and bulldozed them all down, put new trees. So when I was a kid, the trees were only about this big. And now just think, you know, what we have for a windbreak now. It's a beautiful windbreak. One thing about land is you really learn different wet places where tractors got stuck and stuff like that. Some of those things are transferred over the years, the stories and stuff like that. Up on the east farm here, we used to have corn and alfalfa strips, but now we raise more beans, less hay. It's a little bit more work contour strip farming, but it's well worth it because you don't have as much erosion, and that's what is most important in farming, is trying to keep your topsoil in place. We'll have to see if Matthew wants to farm. He's really interested in the computers and different things like that, so I think you shouldn't really force another person, force it on to them. It's great if they decide this is something that you really want to do. That's what's really important, is do what you want to do. I see different farmers, and there's about 1,000 different ways you farm, but everybody determines what they think is the right way, and then they do really well. But if they're forced into farming a certain way, it's not going to work.
It's the 6th generation, and the pressure's on, so I hope he becomes a farmer.
We are in Wilson Township, Winona County, and we are on the farm that was established by my great-great-great-grandfather in April of 1856. This gentleman is just short of 80 years old. He sells his assets in New Hampshire, and with his daughter and her husband and 3 little kids in tow, they head west. They go to the Ohio River and float downstream to St. Louis, get on a steamboat, and apparently in search of a new property, they landed at Winona, Minnesota, and in April of 1856, this 80-year-old man purchased this property from an Indian gentleman named Pierre Chowchenny for the sum of $1,100. So that would mean that this farm has been in my family for 156 years.
There's a lot of, deep history here, and a lot of things that, that we're proud that we're here. We were established here in 1854, and it's my father's side. So there was a father and a son that settled here to begin with. It was Hiram and Philander. And then Philander had some sons, and one of them's name was Sears. And then Sears married Lily Fogelsong. And then my father was born. There was 6 children in that family. He passed away in 2003. And I'm the last one, the youngest one. I married Jean. She was Jean Manahan from Chatfield. And so Colin will be 6th generation here. He's kind of starting to buy into the farm and buying some machinery, and plus he helps me farm also. When I'm out in the field, I just, feel good about being out there working the soil, and know that someday my son or even possibly my daughter will come back and farm this land, and their kids, I would hope, and we're feeding people several times more than us, and hundreds of people that we're raising food for. That's what we do. We love our farm, and we love our background, we love our agriculture, and we talk about it, and we promote it.
It's an honor. I feel blessed by, being able to stay here.
There aren't many farms that have been in the same family for 150 plus years.
History is like the rudder on a boat. It's always behind you, but it's guiding where you're going. And I think it's very important that people realize where they've come from as they are looking to the future. And in this more modern age where there are people that don't understand where their food comes from, they think that, well, the hamburger comes from the grocery store, and they don't really understand that, then places that can educate people and show people where it really came from and comes from to this day is very important.
We turn now to the farms of today and a program that helps make them safer. It's the popular Farm Safety Camp, which is held each year to educate young people about the potential dangers of rural living. Everything from heavy equipment to lawnmowers. It's serious business, but as you'll see, it's also a lot of fun. Let's join this year's host, Jim Checkle, who'll give us a tour of the Farm Safety Camp held on his farm.
Kids this age are, they're not always right in the house under their parents' care. They're running around, they're getting into things. They are, testing the boundaries of being an individual, and they can get hurt. They need to know about this information. They need to know how to stay safe. They just eat up this knowledge. They absorb the information so readily. It's just enjoyable to work with children this age.
It really amazed me that they were so interested and so absorbent. Like everything somebody said they would take to heart and really wanted to implement it. And at the end of the day, I asked them if they were going to go home and make changes, and all of them sincerely wanted to go home and change things at their house.
Jim Checkle, you have done a wonderful thing here with the farm and also the Farm Safety Camp. Tell us about the farm first, would you please?
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. The farm has been in my family since 1947. My grandfather purchased it from a man who moved to a farm in Wisconsin. And in the 1930s, this farm was actually a prototype farm for the University of Minnesota, and we had many buildings on here. There was 22 buildings on it at the time that I purchased it, and now I've got it down to about 9 buildings. I bought it in 1992 from my parents, and I rented it out for a few years and started farming it myself in 2000.
Really nice, and you've got it looking really great. When did you start the Farm Safety Camp?
Dodge County Farm Bureau started the safety camp in 1998, and we had it at the fairgrounds for a few years, and then I was approached about having it out here, and we thought, well, we'll try it 1 year and see what happens, and now 4 years later we're having the 4th annual one out here.
Jim, you've got a lot of young people walking around the farm and learning about farm safety. How many children are out here today?
On Tuesday we had 102, and today we have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200. We usually have about 300 students a year come out here for the safety camp. So in the 15 plus years that we've been doing safety camp, we've been looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4,500 students have gone through.
Wow, what a tremendous impact, and possibly you've saved accidents from happening and possibly saved lives. Have you noticed a dramatic change in farm safety issues after you started doing this?
Well, one of the things that I have noticed is we are getting fewer and fewer students out here who have ever even been on a farm. And so when we start talking about things like power takeoffs and high voltage power lines and augers, we often ask the students, are you familiar with these items? And most of the time they've never heard of these things. And then we also get parents who say, well, my child is never going to go out onto a farm. Why do they need to go to a farm safety camp? To which we usually reply, well, it's called a farm safety camp because it happens on a farm. If we had it in a mall parking lot, then we'd say that we're having our annual mall parking lot safety camp.
I'm thinking about those children that might go to a friend's house for a birthday party or to overnight or something, and all of a sudden they're on a farm.
Yes, and I point out that many parents think that their children will never be to a farm, but they're out here, so obviously they've been to at least one farm.
And it's a nice farm. How generous of you to open up the farm. What's the motivating factor that caused you to do that?
Well, when I was about their age, we had a person who was hurt in a combine on here. He actually ended up having traumatic head injury, and he ended up dying later from the injury. We also have almost every person who I knew that was about my father's age was missing an arm or a leg. My father was missing one of his fingers from a farm accident. I myself have had a few times where you stand back and just go, whoa, that could have been bad. And I think it's very important. If we can keep one accident from happening, I think we've accomplished our goal.
A worthy goal. And as these children go back to school, maybe they share with their other classmates or people at school. Maybe they go home and tell mom and dad, really you shouldn't do that because.
And I hear that a lot. People will come up to me and say, because my son or daughter went to your safety camp, they won't ride on the lawnmower with me anymore, or when I start mowing the lawn, they tell me, make sure and stand back 200 feet, or, this type of thing. And so a lot of parents will bring that up, that their child has brought information back to their siblings or to their parents.
So you're taking the instruction here to the third graders at the Casson-Manorville School and multiplying it all through the community and wherever they might go in their life.
Correct.
Jim, do you mind if we just walk around and you talk a little bit about some of the safety stations here today?
Sure.
Meet some of the people?
We came here to kind of educate the kids on some of the different equipment we use and a couple of the procedures that we do, just to familiarize them with what we do in case we have to show up and help sometimes, so they aren't scared of us, I guess. They had some really good questions. They seemed pretty interested in the stuff that we showed them and seemed to they seemed to understand more than I expected them to about the stuff we do and the equipment we have and procedures we do and stuff.
Well, we're very honored that the Sheriff's Department is here. The Dodge County Sheriff's Department is the first person who responds to any type of a farm accident or any problems that occur on a farm. And what they do is they secure the area and make sure that it's safe for the ambulance, and they're also the ones who call in Mail 1 in the event that it's something that is more of an emergency than what the local ambulance can handle. Or they also call in fire departments if they have to do extrications of people from machinery, or if there's any chemical spills, they'll take responsibility for chemical and gas spills too. Many people aren't aware of this, but one of the #1 causes of accidents and death in the United States are when people are standing on grain that is moving from the bottom, such as grain that's in a wagon or grain that's in a grain bin. And I just recently read that there are as high as 440 farm deaths every year in the United States, and the #2 cause of death is people suffocating in grain. And so what Jan is doing here is she actually has a scale model to show moving grain and what happened.
Who thinks that this one is safe to eat? One important thing that I thought that I learned and that I feel that the students learned was just how important it is to be careful around chemicals, around poisons, how some chemicals can look like candy, they can look like, Gatorade, a juice, something you would drink. So how easily it would be to, take something like that and eat it or drink it and get very sick or die from it. So I thought that was pretty important.
Can anyone here tell me what a power takeoff is? Well, this is the power takeoff safety demonstration. I've been doing the power takeoff safety demonstration for several years now, and it's fun. I ask the kids how many are farm kids. I ask them if they have power takeoffs at home. And usually 2 or 3 of them are farm kids, and they have power takeoffs at home. They're familiar with them, but the other kids don't realize that their parents' cars at home have power takeoffs. Their school bus has a drivetrain, which is basically a power takeoff. They don't realize that power takeoffs are almost everywhere. In this case, the power takeoff is on an electrical generator, but farmers have power takeoffs on corn planters, manure spreaders, forage harvesters, snow blowers, any type of equipment such as even farm wagons, forage wagons, things like that. Power takeoffs are everywhere. And they know that the power takeoff shaft, when it's spinning, is spinning so fast it's just a blur. You can't even see it. They know that it creates a draft that can actually suck in and draw in articles of clothing. If a child has a loose sweater tied around his waist, or a drawstring from a hooded sweatshirt, or a necktie, or an untied shoelace, those articles of clothing, an untucked shirt, those articles of clothing can be drawn into a spinning power shaft, even though you're standing a foot away. they can be drawn in, and once the clothing is wrapped up around the power takeoff shaft, it becomes a rope. It usually does not rip off. It becomes very tight and will draw a person right into the power takeoff shaft. And in this safety demonstration, we actually have a dummy. We use a dummy that gets caught in the power takeoff shaft, and the dummy goes around and around the power takeoff shaft. And of course, every time the dummy goes around, he bangs his head on the tongue and on the three-point hitch. So just going around a power takeoff shaft is not a fun ride. When students leave this safety demonstration, they realize that this is probably an unsurvivable accident, and the only way to deal with power takeoff shafts is to simply stay away from them.
Is this a good helmet for her? No! Even if I had it tight, is it good? Why isn't it good?
Farm and home safety is one of the most important things that we can do to help educate our kids about being safe, and to put on a farm safety camp where they might not otherwise learn about very specific things at their farm or home, about poisons, about tractors, about fire and rescue, is a great way to, one, have fun with the kids, be an educator towards them, teach them good things about themselves and how they can remain safe in those environments. More than once, I've had a parent come up to me and say, because of you, my kids say they can't mow lawn because they're not 12 years old, or they can't do this, or I need to do that. And quite honestly, those are the stories we like to hear, because we know that those children that come here to the camp are going home and spreading the message. The 13 years of doing the farm safety camp, we have yet to have a fatality or an injury with a child on a farm in Dodge County. I'm pretty proud of that. I hope we can continue that. And I like to think that maybe our volunteers and our leaders here at the camp have led to that.
This is really great. You've got 10 working stations, training stations set up with kids from Cass and Mandeville schools, about 300. This is really a good experience for them. What happens in the community after they go back to the school?
Well, we're hoping that the children will share with their families and friends what they learned out here today. And we're hoping that when they come to a farm to visit their friends, that there won't be an accident, that the next child won't be hurt when he goes to someone's farm. We're also hoping that they take it home to their own farms and think before they step across an auger or a power takeoff.
And you've done this for 15 years. What's your goal going forward?
Well, I'm only going to do this for probably about another 25 or 30 years, and then I'm going to quit. But I'm hoping that this continues from that point. We've done this for 15 years, and to my knowledge, we have never had a student who's gone through safety camp that's been injured in anything that we teach safety on.
I hope that continues forever.
So do I. Thank you, Dan.
The organizers of this farm safety camp have received such positive feedback from parents, schools, educators, and the students themselves that they'll keep hosting it every spring.
Now it's time to meet our Farm Connections FFA Student Leader of the Week.
I'm Rachel Moe, and I'm the president of the Hayfield FFA chapter. I try to guide the chapter in the right way, encourage members to get more involved. I have been on some CDE teams. CDE stands for Career Development Events. I've been on the Crops team, the Small Animals team, and then it's called the BIG team, which is the Best Informed Green Hand. I plan to go to college and go into ag education. Forever, I've always wanted to be a teacher, but I want to incorporate the agriculture experience that I've had. I feel that agriculture is involved with pretty much everything, our everyday lives. We're seeing people coming out and experiencing Moore County Farm Bureau Breakfast on the Farm. It's a purpose to get people out on the farm and experience what we experience on an everyday basis. They can go see animals. They can have horse-drawn carriage rides, tractor rides. I am currently serving sausage alongside the guy that's serving pancakes, or throwing pancakes at you, pretty much. I think it's important for community members to get to see the FFA members, you know, out in public and working in the community. I feel like I have experienced personal growth, you know, in talking to people and getting myself more outgoing. It has been a very good experience. I enjoy it a lot.
I hope you enjoyed these visits to the farm. Tune in next week for more Farm Connections.
Farm Connections on KSMQ, sponsored in part by the Cedars of Austin, a senior living community. We even have a retired farmers club. Independent, assisted, and memory care apartments. Learn more at cedarsofaustin.com. Will Mahler, the ag attorney, has been representing dairy farms in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin for 37 years. Will Mahler, the ag attorney's office is in Rochester, and Will is a proud partner of Farm Connections. Thanks, Will Mahler.